Hello, can you hear me now? Yes, my name is Town Planner Mrs. Yemisi Alaka. I'm a town planner by profession, and I work with Lagos State Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development. I've been on so many projects in the ministry, from right of way to monitoring of estates to approving of building plan approvals. Presently, that's what I do now. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Mrs. Dempsey. We had one more guest, but it's unfortunate that he's not been able to join yet. So we'll get on with it. I'd ask a simple question, and then I'll open the floor to the panelists to help us elaborate. I'm going to ask questions like the people who don't have the kind of knowledge that they have, because I mean they are experts in the field. So I'd like to hear, and at the end of this whole session, develop either is a way to look at a new way to look at low-income housing, or a more systematic way to look at low-income housing, or if we're lucky, create also a pathway towards creating systems for affordable housing. So um, for those of us that don't know, I'd like to ask the question to you, Mr. Lukman. What is it that is a system of housing, and most importantly, what is low income housing? You have to unmute.
Sorry about that. So thank you for the question. Low income housing, as the name rightly captured, low income. So it is a very well and a clearly defined housing system that is meant for certain category of people based on income. So for example, if we say low income housing, so what we'll possibly be looking at is that within a particular city, there are certain category of people that have been benchmarked based on their monthly income, that perhaps that benchmark could be a minimum wage. It could be what we call take-home pay based on different cities or different countries, what they consider as a low threshold for anybody who earn within that income range. So in this case, in Nigeria, we will be looking at people who are below the weight of 30,000 naira minimum wage approved. What kind of a housing would be suitable for those category of income group? If you are earning 30,000 naira, or perhaps in some cases, some may say, okay, an amount twice a minimum wage. If you are earning below or in between that amount, you are classified as a low income. So the question now is that what kind of housing will be suitable for this category of people? How do we provide that adequate, qualitative, and something that is within their income region? How do we provide that kind of a housing to suit their need? And of course, they are able to say, we live in a city which is sustainable, we live in a city which is livable for them, and of course, we live in a city that is comfortable for them. So not necessarily for them to live in a squalor or in a slum communities, but adequate, very accessible, very comfortable housing within that income bracket of a minimum wage.
That opens a lot of questions, but I'll open the floor to Mrs. Yemisi to give us an understanding of the subject.
Thank you very much. Just like rightly said by Tampana Lukman, that low-income houses is just like the name implies, is low houses for people with certain minimum earning, that is their take home monthly. Because from what we know is that for you to have house, or what we call housing, it shows your level or standard of living. So just like you have different categories of people, you have different categories of stratas and way of living. But majorly, what determines where you live or the kind of house that you have is your income. Once the income is very low, maybe 30,000, or even some are even lower to 30,000 per month. And everybody has the right to have an accommodation, to have a house, to have a home. So how do we manage, or how do you provide for these people? What kind of category do you put them in? So that's where we have what we call low income, very low income, and we have very, very low cost housing. But there are some other things, maybe as we go on, that determines what is low income houses. For now, well, we have low income houses and it has come to stay and they need to be provided for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Yamsi. Very, very quickly, having listened to your definitions, I'd want to ask you a very dicey question. Now, the people who we say need low-income housing are usually people who work for other people within the city, or work in the center of the cities, that need to reduce as much as possible from their transportation costs. They remove to reduce the amount they take out of their take-home pay for transportation. So the question that I'll ask is, if we want to provide affordable or low-income housing and provide it properly, what parts of the city are best considered for those kind of things, given the fact that most of the people who earn the least in the city work within the center of the city, and the paradox of land being the most expensive at the center of the city? I'll open the floor to Mr. Lukman.
Yeah, thank you. You see, I think that boils down to how we plan our cities in the country. You know, the city is planned based on a certain division, that we have a low-income neighborhood, we have a high-income neighborhood, and of course, we have a medium-income neighborhood. Perhaps in some cases, they could be called low density, medium density, and high density. So we have that stratification within our city. And having said that, for example, if you look at the architecture of the city of Lagos, you will see that within the central area of the city, we have quite a number of informal settlements, or what we may call a slum, in different parts of the city. So in any city, when you have this kind of morphology, the question that will come to mind is that these are kind of a brownfield that can be regenerated or that can be redeveloped into something that can actually serve the people who are currently residing in those communities. If you take statistics of those who reside in those slums and informal communities in different central mainland area of Lagos, you see that yes, these are predominantly low-income groups. So the question is, how do we redevelop or regenerate those communities so that they are able to have a quality housing? They are not displaced from where they are, so they are able to have access to qualitative housing in the same location. And of course, in moving to other parts of the city, definitely that becomes so much easier because the transportation cost is expected to reduce. But then there are certain other things that equally need to come into play. How effective our bus mass transit system, or what kind of mass transportation system do we have to strengthen the existing structure we have on ground to be able to move them from their location. Let's say housing is resolved, transportation, how do we move them from that location to their location, to the place of work? So that is one aspect that we need to deal with within the urban, the cosmopolitan area of Lagos. Now, another area that could be considered apart from the brownfield is a green field. So in talking about a green field, now you will agree with me that the land resources available in the city of Lagos is limited. So an opportunity for greenfield construction is equally limited, except you are able to move in the eastern part of Lagos around the Lekki axis, or perhaps you move to the mega city region of the city, which is around the Mowe Ibafor axis, where we have such opportunity for green development. But then in doing that, so one will begin to think that how do we begin to create another settlement growth pool in those regions, so that people who reside in those corridors, the low-income people who reside in those corridors, they are not traveling from Lekki all the way to Lagos Island to resume work, or they are not traveling all the way from Mowe Ibafor to resume work at Apapa. So there is need to rethink satellite or a new growth pole in those areas. So those are the kind of things that we begin to look at. The greenfield, the brownfield can be adapted to really resolve low-income housing within the city.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lukman. Thank you. We'll come back to investigate some of your answers. But I'll open the before I open the floor to Mrs. Yemisi, I'd like to thank Professor Olusoya for joining us. Professor Olusoya is a professor of architecture in UNILAG. He's a well-known person. I don't think I have the right to introduce him. I'll just open the floor for him briefly to introduce himself. He's a senior in the profession. I'll let him introduce himself.
Yes, I'm terribly sorry that I had problems logging on. And in fact, the name here says Olasunbo Olusoya. So Dr. Olusoya has loaned me a laptop, and that's how I've been able to come on finally. Yes, I'm a professor of architecture, and I have a passion for housing, large-scale housing, and so that's what my career had been basically about. So that would do for introduction for now. So when you come me on, then I'll begin to talk about what issues you would like from me. Thank you.
Okay. I'll come back to you shortly with some questions, but I'd like to open the floor back to Mrs. Yemisi to talk about the last question I asked with respect to location of affordable and low-cost housing in the city. I'd like to add to it that, is there a way that we can put these low-cost houses in places that are most effective to reduce the movement along the corridors of the city for the people who work in the center of the city and earn the least?
Thank you once again. It's possible to provide low-income houses within the main cities, that is the urban center area. All that we need to do is planning. We already know that high-income earners need the services of these low-income people. And most of the time, the provision that is on ground is much more higher for them in terms of affordability. They can't really afford it. But already we know that we need service of these low-income providers like the driver, the cook, the maids, cleaner, and few other people like that. Definitely, we need to provide for them. We need to plan for them so that they can live within the area, so that because there's not much means of transportation for them, the mass transportation. If they have to start taking out of the money for their transporting to the area, like, okay, maybe someone is working in VI and is living somewhere around Mowe, is earning 30,000 per month. It will be very difficult for that person to make ends meet. So therefore, if we can make a little provision for them to live in, it does not necessarily have to, because if we don't make provision, what we are planning for is slums within the urban area. That's why you have any small open space, you'll find out people will just put one thing there and start living. And before you know it, from 1 to 10 to 50, slum has already been created near all these high income earners. If you go through our centers, not just in Lagos, even in Abuja, even in Ibadan, Port Harcourt, where you have this high income area, because there's lack of adequate planning for low income earners that are servicing. Most of them are really servicing this high income or low density area. They tend to look for a means of living closer so that they can have a little saving at the end of every month. So the green belt, the brownfield and everything, we need to plan, and no matter how small, let's accommodate them. How can we do this? We need a lot of things to put in place together to make sure we have adequate information to enable this planning to come to reality, so that we can have low-income earner houses within or around, not too far from their place of work, because whether we like it or not, they will come and work. And before you know it, they start squatting, they start building shanties around. And before Jack Robinson, the whole place is upside down and there's no more beauty in our environment again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Yamisi. I'm going to ask the prof a 2 or 3 part question, because we had been talking before. So the question is simple. What has made this low-income housing generally? What has made it such a scourge in the popular culture, in design, in schools, and also in just the general world of architecture generally? To do low-income housing has become such a scourge. So is there, the second part of the question is there a way that we can turn this low-income housing into a business savvy or privatizable venture that can create capital enough for it to become a viable business means through architecture? And then the third part of the question is, places like Makoko and those kind of buildings. They are built for low, very low income earners. What's the future of those kind of places architecturally?
Yes, thank you very much. Now, I want to address the matter from first principles, because otherwise we'll be wasting our time. The issue is this: when you talk about low-income housing, I really don't understand. I'm a university professor. I cannot afford decent housing on my salary. I can't. So what are we talking about? Now, I can't afford decent housing on my salary for two reasons. One, the first one is that very few people in this country actually earn a living wage. Very few sectors that have a living wage. So we have to understand this, that when they say that Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world, it is not propaganda. It is that by every objective measure, there is serious poverty in this land. That's one. So a professor cannot afford decent housing. Okay. So that's one. The other issue is this, that there's the issue of living wage. Then there is the issue of cost of housing production. It is just really incredible. So even those who can afford it, I would say that if something that should cost 10 million is costing 100 million, then that is still a case of poverty. Now, what we need to understand is this. Nigeria, there is a poor country. Most of us, the real problem is that even the educated Nigerians don't understand that. They think Nigeria is a rich country. This is a very, very poor country. And unless something happens, the whole thing must collapse on its own contradiction. Now, the economy, the problem is that this economy is not based on production. You cannot have a country of 200 million and not have an economy that is based on production. So with 200 million people, you have to have a measure of industrialized. In fact, you have to have sustained industrialization. The issue is this. When you're talking about power, inadequacy of power, the inadequacy of roads, all these inadequacies have its roots in a non-productive economy. So the issue of housing is the same as that of inadequate roads, inadequate infrastructure, inadequate this, inadequate that. And it boils down to the fact that we in this country have not acquired the capacity for production of the goods and services that we need. So that's just it. So the capacity to provide goods and services, and that includes housing on a large scale. Now, the way it works is this. So the matter affects the poor and the rich alike. The bad roads, the the traffic and everything that you have, it affects the rich and the poor alike. So you need to solve this problem. The only thing that I think that we've been able to solve for now is perhaps the issue of telecommunication, because both the rich and the poor seem to be able to have at least some phone and things. But apart from that, there is a serious, really serious problem. So I can now go into what we can begin to do, but it is really about production, large-scale production of goods and services. It is about development, serious development. We need to understand that. And the whole premise has to do with the understanding that this is a poor country, very, very poor country. So that's the place to start. And this illusion that because we have oil, we are rich. You see, it is an ignorance that is permitted the market woman. But when the educated Nigerian does not understand that Nigeria is a poor country, then we're really in serious trouble. And most Nigerians, most educated Nigerians don't. So the problem of this country really boils down to ignorance, really. And the ignorance of the educated is the worst kind of ignorance. It is really, really destructive. I'll just leave it for now. If you now have further questions based on that premise, we can take it from there.
Okay, I'll come right back to you in a few seconds. Let me ask another question to Mr. Lukman. Given what the prof has said, I think we'll go right back again to first principles and definitions, because I mean there's nothing positive if we don't have, because if for instance production is the issue is baseline production, which is a mark of our development, and we fail on that, then it means that we also have to define what we're trying to make as a system. Are we trying to make a system of affordable housing so that there's housing for all because things are affordable and can be produced? That's the question number one. Is it a system of affordable housing we're trying to create, or are we trying to solve the problem of the low income earner generally by creating systems when even the high income earner doesn't have access to housing because there's no production? Or most importantly, is it that we should go the route of creating social housing? Yeah. So which way forward for Nigeria, Mr. Lukman?
Thank you. I think, let me appreciate Prof for bringing the wider perception of poverty into the whole discussion, because in most cases, the discussion around the poverty has always been centered on the people who reside in the slum communities and of course in different informal communities around. But then if we look at housing indicators, what housing should be, we discover that a larger percentage of our city dwellers, they are actually in poverty, and of course they are living in slums, because in most places the adequacy of infrastructure is relatively non-existent, if we can put it that way. The roads, we see very luxurious, what we can call a very big and a luxurious building, and the access to that place is nothing to write home about. And we have a situation whereby the producer of that building, we need to find a way of providing his own water. There is no system of a sustainable water supply. And of course, power to really power the house is another thing. So the poverty is manifesting in different dimensions and in different scale. So now the question about whether we should go for affordable housing or whether we should go for low income housing. I think the bottom line is that we are yet to come to that conclusion that what type of economy do we want to run? What kind of a system do we want to operate? And I completely agree with Prof that yes, you don't build something on nothing. No, without those bases, those sustainable economic bases that could actually empower people. Definitely the discussion around affordable housing, affordable infrastructure, or access to different services, those discussions will still remain theoretical for some time to come. But within the system that we are operating, because when we are talking about inadequacy of so many things, and of course a lack of economic base, it has been a discussion that has been ongoing for as far as I can remember. And that discussion, even in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when we still have factors of production still booming, still vibrant, we can see that from 80, 90, all those factors of production have been declining. So if that decline has been sustained over the years, the question for us in the housing sector is that what can we do? The system is not showing any sign of improvement in the nearest possible time as far as I can see. But I believe with a concerted effort, things can start improving. So in the midst of that decline sustain a base of economic production, what can we do in the housing sector? So that is where the issue of affordable housing or low-income housing comes in. Now, if we are going to look at affordable housing, that itself is a very wide area to deal with. And that will be looking at if you are earning 100,000 naira in a month, you should be able to have access to decent housing. If you are earning 10,000 naira in a month, you should be able to have access to adequate housing. That is the concept about affordable housing. But when it comes to low income housing, that is a well-restricted area, a well-defined area that if you are earning below this particular threshold of income, definitely you should have access to housing. So, but I will want to go that something that is looking at the larger picture of the society, which is affordable housing, because the issue we are dealing with now, we should be able to take it beyond the people who live in the slum community. We should be able to really transform it in a way that, yes, it is capturing the people, the nurses out there, the doctors out there, the professor out there, the engineers out there. It should be able to capture everyone. So affordable housing could be the way forward that we can look at, yes, if I'm earning 50,000 naira, what kind of affordable housing, what kind of quality housing that is there, that is out there for me. And in doing that, we need to begin to come to the realization that how do we make this work? Is it by having a mixed income system that where we have a few that are rich subsidizing the poor to make the housing affordable for larger population or larger residents of a particular city? And of course, again, is that this concept of using different areas within the city, I think we really need to imbibe that culture that yes, in our building, in our production of a building within the city center, instead of focusing on the Victoria Island, the Lekki, where we have this high income and buildings structure, how do we begin to accommodate some of these people who don't have that kind of capacity within those structure we are putting up in those highbrow areas? So that is another question we need to look at to begin to address the issue of affordability of housing. And most importantly, in my opinion, as we have now, I know that a lot of plans are coming up in different areas. Some are focusing on the physical development alone, but I want a situation whereby some of these plans begin to focus on economic sustainability as well. So if we are able to drive the economic sustainability, then the issue of housing comes in. Whatever policy, whatever approaches that we want to adopt, we should be able to tie those things to economic sustainability. So in summary, I want to make a case for affordable housing, so which cuts across, but then we need to equally begin to focus on the sustainability of our economic system to make this worthwhile for all the residents of our cities in Nigeria. Thank you.
Mr. Lukman, you bring up some very interesting points, and this is something that my firm has been working on for a bit to create economic sustainability using housing. So that's topic for another a totally different session. Before I I'd like to ask the prof another question. I want to take a segue and ask the prof another question, and it's a very simple question. Do we need systems for low-income housing? And if we do, how do we create these systems? What's most important?
I think once we are still thinking about it in terms of low-income housing, we are missing the point. I think the issue is that housing can be an engine of growth of the economy. So use housing to generate growth in the economy. Use housing to develop technology, because if you look at telecommunications, it's a question of technology. So use housing to develop technology, use housing to create high value addition in the value chain in terms of the relationship between industries. So an industrial, the kind of industrial infrastructure that you can create with housing means that you can, in terms of you are doing the housing, you are industrializing the housing process. You have to industrialize the housing process. So you create industrial infrastructure. You are creating value chains. Otherwise, when you create these value chains, high value chains, okay, in terms of industrialization, then everybody benefits. But it is by directing that kind of capital and that kind of energy to housing, to revolutionizing the housing production, that everybody can benefit. Okay, once see, you have to involve at least people at my level. Okay, now the very rich and those ones can take care of themselves somehow, but people, I mean, it is the middle class that creates development in any society. Okay, so once you can get the people who are educated and who needs a certain kind of, once you can get them involved in the housing process, then you can create a kind of infrastructure and industrialization that crashes the cost of housing, because the whole process is really it is a wealth. Okay, this is it. It has to be a wealth creating process. Housing has to be a wealth creating. When you see, if it is not wealth creating, it means that you are now having to bring wealth from other places to put into housing. So that is a wealth draining process. Wealth creation is really what we have to understand. What does wealth creation mean? What does wealth creation mean? And wealth creation is about value addition in the value chain. You just really have to understand that. Okay, let me please quickly use a small example. Look at this example. In terms of value chain, the farmer who grows cocoa, he grows cocoa, right? And then he sells the seeds, dries the seeds and sells it, and they take it to Cadbury and they turn it into high-end chocolate and then send it back to Nigeria, and the cocoa farmer cannot afford that chocolate. Okay, so he remains in poverty. Whereas if within that system, you can begin to process, to add value to the cocoa, and then you send that out into the world, that is how to create wealth. That is how to create. So wealth creation must be the emphasis. Housing is such an opportunity for wealth creation, and that is the win-win situation for everybody. Otherwise, it's going to be a wealth destruction rather than wealth creation. It's the whole orientation. Let me just say that what it boils down to actually is that we have to move from the kind of way we produce right now. This kind of customized, where everybody gets buy his own plot of land, gets his own draftsman or architect, buy his own blocks, buy this. You can't do that for 200 million people. One, you have to aggregate the housing production process. When you aggregate it, then you have to develop systems, okay, industrialized systems. The emphasis must be on high performance components, not on building materials. So you want to house 200 million people with blocks and mortar? It will not happen. It cannot happen. It has never happened anywhere in the world. It will not happen here. because there are laws that govern everything, and exception will not be made for Nigeria. It will not happen. It cannot happen. Bricks, blocks and mortar to house 200 million people. So you have to go into higher level performance materials. And then you are thinking of housing the poor, right? The mentality of that is that you build all these small bungalows all over the place. What is the infrastructure with which you are going to with which you are going to support that? Whatever happens, you must build high. It is really just that simple. You must build high. You must have high density, because it is high density that can justify the kind of infrastructure. You can't, with the way we are building right now, it is not possible to have efficient public transportation. You can't. You can't. Again, public transportation, if you densify the communities, okay, then that can be a means of wealth generation. If you don't, it is a means of wealth destruction. We have to understand all that. So so the first thing is that housing must be aggregated, and then we have to move from building materials to building low value added building materials to high performance, high value added building components. So it's just that general orientation to start with. That's the way to make progress. And you can start with that. Now, let me use an example of that at some scale, because something like that has happened in Lagos State. Let me see if I can, okay. Let me share the screen. That's possible. Okay. Well, this Dr. Oluseun has laptop and I'm having it. Yes, I'm trying to, okay, hold on. Okay, yeah.
Okay, to share your screen.
That's it.
Which are this? This.
So it came here, I don't know what. Oh. This is it.
Okay. Okay, it says you are sharing.
Okay, is it showing now?
So speak to him. Okay, he's saying yes.
Okay.
He's giving you thumbs up.
Yes,
Okay.
It is.
Okay, now, look at this. This is the way they used to do roads in Lagos. Customized. And when the roads are being done, everything stops and the people suffer. Okay? And then look at one administration came along and introduced these precast systems. This is an industrialized system. Okay? Now, this industrialized system, the molds and everything are made in Nigeria. So this is much higher value addition than this. And then you have factories that produce this. So this results in development of industries that support the road construction infrastructure. Okay, so look at this. While this is going on, now this road is not completed yet, but you can see that it has not disrupted the lives of the people here, like here. Now, you put in this kind of infrastructure, it means that you cannot have this kind of, you need to actually raise the densities of the communities that that benefit from this. So a linear kilometer of roads that should service maybe 100,000 people should not be servicing 1,000 people, because that becomes unsustainable. So we have to have high densities in order to put in this kind of infrastructure. But you can see this. So you produce these in factories like this, and then just see the difference this makes to what you had before. Just to see the difference to this. So that's one level. When you apply this same kind of thing to housing, now in fact, we have done something like this for Lagos State government. Oh goodness. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, you set up a factory on the site. This what we did under First Trawler Administration. You set up a factory on the site, and this is not my laptop, and it is okay. You set up a factory on the site. You produce components. So the issue is not building materials, but building components. Okay, and then you assemble with speed. You assemble. This one goes in 44 days. You are at this level, and you are at this level. So this is the kind of thing that you do, and this was achieved because you came into the community. The idea was to come into the community, and all the small the way the land use, to remove all that, and then to put in this higher level development. And this is, whether this is low cost or high cost would not depend on the level of finishes, okay? But you are producing something that is basically adequate, and you are producing it on a large scale. So the difference really between what is high end or low end is a question of finishes. But the components allows you to produce this on a large scale for everybody. So this is an industrialization of and you can see that it translates even from the production, from construction of roads. You simply must industrialize. That's the route to go. Thank you.
I think that has been very enlightening, and I would sum that up very easily by saying that we need to create super components and less doors and more density. By doing that, we have less roads and we spend less on infrastructure, and our infrastructure then becomes more efficient. So in light of this, I would like to ask Town Planner Yemisi, how do we access the kind of finance we need to create these kind of things? And from an economic standpoint, being that the prof rightly said that the housing can be a way to move us away from poverty if it adds the kind of value that it's known to be able to add on an industrialized scale. How do we create the economics around these things, this kind of ideas, the policy around this kind of ideas, and where do we get the money from? So I'll open the floor to Madam Yemisi.
Thank you. Well, the Prof has rightly said a lot of things to us in terms of production, mass production. That's what I can deduce from it, that for us to have either low cost or affordable homes, like Town Planner Lukman summarizes onto. The affordable home is what can be really achievable in this part of the world. Now, getting industrialized materials or construction of high density to be able to meet up with demand requires finance. Everybody knows that. There's nothing you can do, it's like the bedrock. All the policies, all the ideas, every design, everything boils down to implementation. Then how do you implement if there's no finance? And we all know that finance is the major thing and it's kind of jeopardizing most of these policies in place. Well, notwithstanding, we still have to work it around to ensure that we have the best, because we can't say because things are not working or we've tried this, it's not working, and we now fold our hands. It has to be done right. It has to be productive to the extent that, okay, we can boast of, okay, we will be able to do this. We need to know the data. What are we really looking at? How many people are we providing for? If you have the data, then you can know, okay, I'm producing for 10, I'm producing for 20. Then you know, okay, how much do I really need? Then how do I go about it? How do I get the finance? It boils down mostly to government and to other private investors. Because fine, we have government, but government cannot do it all alone. We still need private investors, like private-public partnership for the development of affordable housing in Nigeria at large, not just Lagos. In every part of our country, we need private people to get involved. When we engage private people in these policies, there has to be subsidies from government's end to enable the private people coming in, the private investors, to be able to function well, to be able to carry out these plans as proposed. Because if there is no subsidy for them, with the economic situation, it will be difficult to really provide adequate, affordable houses for people. So government need to come in and subsidize in terms of availability of land, in terms of rates and taxes, in terms of revenue, so that they can be able to, to make sure that there is incentives for these private people. Then if there is incentive, then you now see that a lot of private people will come up with ideas that will be workable to have affordable homes for everyone. In Lagos or Nigeria at large, most of our urban centers, we now have affordable homes. Then we need, as much as possible, government need to encourage the use of our local materials. Different areas, we have people with different cultures, with different way of life. People in the north, there's a way they live. You can't just build anything. Even if it's affordable, they won't take it. So we need to use their local material and now modernize it in a way that will make it functional for them to be able to live in it. That is when you now have a decent houses for them. If a house is functional, is decent, enough for everyone to live in. That is, you have your water, you have good access to the road, to the house, you have your sanitary disposal and everything, then that house is decent enough for anyone to live in, even if it's high density, it has to be decent, not just anything for people. Because if it's not okay, like Professor said, that even some professors cannot even afford some kind of a decent house. But if a house is functional, then anybody will be able to live in it when provided with support of government to ensure that they give them subsidy, then it will be workable. Then we have Lagos State Building Investments Corporation, LBIC. The LBIC makes it in a way that it will be convenient for you, at least for you to have a decent accommodation. At times, they allow you to go and look for what you want. But the only thing is that whatever you bring on table must have collateral, that is documentation. It has to have a registered title, because the house you are bringing in, the house that you want to buy, that they want to subsidize for you, must have a registered title, because that's what you're going to use as collateral anyway. You're not going to look for any other collateral for you to be able to. At least that's a way of helping out. Then you have OPIC as well in Ogun State. They also have a program for people, at least maybe average income earners, to be able to come in. Then, or whatever you know that is okay for you, you come in. It's just that that kind of a house must have a registered title, because that's what we're going to use as a collateral for you to be able to do that. Then you have other policies by government, like Federal Ministry of Housing. There's a way, they have accommodation as well. Then you have Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria. They also have way of helping people out. Then you have the Federal Housing, I think NHF, that is they also, National Housing Fund. They also have a way of helping people out to finance them up, to help them out in getting accommodation. Then you have a multi-talented housing policy that can help people. It's just that there is need for more enlightenment on how this program runs, on how people can access it. They are all there. These programs are all there to help you how to get a subsidy for your housing, for you to be able to get adequate and decent home, affordable houses. So I think with all these policies in place and private sector incentives and housing investment and encouragement of using local materials, helping people to go into research for the purpose of mass production of these materials. When you have these materials in large production, then it can help to be able to provide adequate or help out in providing affordable homes, a decent accommodation for people. All that we need now is just enlightenment program for people to be able to tap into these resources and help out. But basically, we need that, there is need for middle class people to really come up, for people to really invest in housing production. And with this, there's so much programs that governments have in place that we help, that is the private partnership. When there's availability of land, when there's reduction in rates and taxes, then it will be easier for private investors to come in. And I believe with this, there will be adequate affordable housing for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Thank you. That has gone a long way in our understanding. But from what you've said, I believe that there's a few questions. So to kind of get towards the end of this, I'll tease Professor Olusoya with some questions from the last for what Tampana Yemisi said, and then I'll open the floor after him to Mr. Lukman to answer. So my question is this, sir.
You go to them now.
We all know that we understand exactly what she's saying with respect to the government being given a helping hand to people to get housing, which ends up being a lot of times these customized little blocks that people build with materials as against super components. Now the question is this: we also the questions are this: one, we also know that mortgage as a thing in Nigeria hasn't worked. NHF gives 5 million or so for housing, and you can't build for that amount if conventionally, etc. Now, should we, one, forget the mortgage system and recreate our own kind of mortgage system to ensure that we can get adequate housing, being that that's what the problem, one of the biggest problems we have is finance? And secondly, what is a super component made of local materials?
Okay, let me start with high value addition. Again, maybe let me see if I can quickly. Now, look at this. Is it showing? It's showing. Okay. This is how we build. Okay. So they put in the block wall. They come in at some point. They put in all these, and at the end of the day, you have this as waste. Okay, and this is about 10% of the building. That 10%, you could have invested it in components like this. Okay, so this is just higher value added. These components have higher value addition than this. It doesn't even mean that invariably they are even cheaper. It's just that, especially because you are producing them on a large scale, so they are cheaper. But it boils down to this. You can't do this insofar as everyone is trying to build their own houses. If you're giving people 5 million to build their houses, even trying to process mortgage for everybody doesn't make sense. So if you aggregate housing, then the mortgage thing can work, because you are not processing mortgage for individuals. You can't do that. This customization, you can't do that. So everything boils down to aggregation. Okay, so aggregation is the key. Now, the issue is this: when you aggregate, how do you now provide this housing? There are 3 methods. Aggregation is the bottom line. So you can have aggregation through government production of housing. You can have aggregation through developers, and you can have aggregation through cooperatives. Okay. In the schemes that I've been involved with the government, you'll find that one administration comes, has one direction, and that administration comes and have another direction. Okay, so there is a problem. Now, the developer is interested in profit. What I have found to work best is cooperatives. People simply have to come together and take their destiny in their own hands. If this were my laptop, I would have shown you examples of some cooperatives that I've been involved in. people come together and acquire land together and build together and get mortgage together. So there is aggregation, and cooperative is the best way to go about it in Nigeria or in most developing countries, rather than developers or government, cooperatives. But you must aggregate. That's the bottom line.
That's a nice one, sir. I'll open the floor again to Mr. Lukman to see if he has a contrary opinion to what we've just learned.
And I think I completely agree with Prof. And of course, what Tantana Alaka has said so far. Yeah, in aggregation, as mentioned by the Prof, to me, I think it would be ideal if we have a system that can actually put all this aggregation together. If we have a cooperative society, perhaps somewhere in Lekki doing it in their own way. If we have a cooperative society somewhere in Magodo, and we have another cooperative society somewhere in Mushin. So all those things, they still remain disjointed. They are working, and of course, they are producing the results. They are getting the results in their own way. But the key thing is, how do we pull all this together to become something at a scale that can have that wider impact within the state? And it is this kind of thinking that led us to approach the Ministry of Housing to see how this aggregation can really take place and work in an effective and in a very efficient way for the state. So, and what we have proposed to the state is what we call a Lagos Affordable Housing Development Fund. That was what we have proposed. So that funding is looking at not only the developers, to support the developers in terms of production, so that they are able to access development funding at a very single-digit rate, instead of the current market rate that we have at double digit at about 20-something percent, which in any way cannot be sustainable for housing finance. So that funding will equally look at the people who need housing, but this time around, they must come under the platform of whether cooperative or what we call intermediary agency through any association. So they are not coming as an individual. So that funding will equally look at that. Then the funding is equally targeting efforts like what Prof has been able to show so far, in terms of if you are having innovative building materials that is reducing the cost of a conventional building system, which is a brick and mortar system, to about 50 to 60%. Definitely that fund is meant for such people to be able to produce in a scale, to be able to employ, and of course to be able to make all these components available for rapid and mass development of housing in the city. So the funding is looking at so many areas. Equally, the funding is looking at a green development. If you can build, or if you can produce a housing that can reduce the cost of energy, the funding is equally there to support and sustain that kind of initiative. So that is the area that that funding is coming from, to look at the people who will produce in a larger scale. What we set as a minimum under that funding for now is that if you are going to produce a housing, a minimum of about 20 units, you should be able to have access to that funding, so that we are not looking at an individual who is building a bungalow here and there. So that is the idea. And in a way that narrowed down to issue of a mass housing development. Even the land that will be made available, that land will ensure that yes, you want to build at a scale that can accommodate a larger number of people, that can take a larger number of people away from a different informal settlements or slum development, and of course creating that platform for people who need housing, whether you are from middle income or you are from a low income, to be able to have access. So that funding arrangement is still ongoing with the ministry, and we are hopeful that very soon we should be able to pull through with that. So, and that actually capture the mood or the platform provided by Prof in all this aggregation and using the components and of course innovative building materials to drive mass housing in the city of Lagos. So that is what we are trying to achieve. So, and I clearly agree with what has been said earlier. Thank you.
Okay, well, we've kind of run out of time, and this has been very, very, very interesting and important conversation. I'll just like to seal this up in a very neat package. I'll give everybody 1 minute to just give us a roundup of their temperature with regards how we can create systems for low-cost housing that are efficient for our cities in Nigeria. I'll start from you, Mrs. Yemisi.
Well, thank you, Mr. George, and everyone. Today has really been a wonderful time listening to everyone's opinion, especially Prof, coming in from a perspective of industrialization and academic aspect of the whole thing. Thank you so much. And then Tamplana Lukman as well. But from my own perspective and my own conclusion about the whole thing is that for a particular sector in the economy is that we should not despise it, that we should be focused that either we like it or not, this low income group are still at disadvantage of most of these policies. So there is need for us as government, as individual, in the industry, to really have what we call proper identification. That is data. We need to have data to be able to know what we are really doing. What are we really looking at? How many people are we really providing for? We can't just like a Prof said, this government comes in, we tell you, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. What is the number of people that you're really projecting for? I mean, providing for? What is the database for the houses that you want to provide? Who are in this category? What you want to provide, will it get to the end users? We really need to work on that. Then there is need to reorganize the existing policies to make it workable, to be able to meet either low income houses or affordable houses. We need to really work on these, policies, to reorganize it, to make it more enlightening, to do programs to enlighten the people of what is meant for, or how to access all the finances, financial institutes that are available, the mortgages, the LBIC, the OPEC, the OPIC, the commercial banks, the mortgage banks. How do people really assess what is available? Then the National Housing Fund, I believe, should not be made mandatory. I mean, it should not be made compulsory for people. It should be something that is voluntary. If you really look at the pros and the cons, you should be able to decide on your own that, do I really want to do this? Because it's not everybody that really need loan to have accommodation, or I want to access another means to get my accommodation. I don't have to go to NHF. So we really need to look into that. Then there is need for government to assist the private people to be able to make them to come on board, because there is no way government can do it alone. Government needs to make the atmosphere to be able to, I mean, accommodate private people to come into partnership with government so that they can provide enough and adequate affordable housing for people. Then there is also need for, most importantly, like what Prophet was saying about the components of the houses, the industrial production. We need, first of all, we need to, I mean, there is a basis. Where do you get the material to get the industry, to get the components? It starts from the local materials. So these local materials, we need to do a lot of research to be able to know, okay, in this region, what kind of lifestyle do they live? What kind of material is adequate or available? Then work around it. What can we use these materials to do to be able to have mass production of it? In the clay area, in where you have rough and palms, what can you do with this material to be able to have the components so that we can have high density homes, houses that will be able to accommodate people, that people can afford, so that all this shortage of housing, we can work on it. Then schemes, we need to have a lot of schemes. In the time past, maybe in the early 70s, I know most of private firms like Chevron, Shell, they provide housing for their workers. Even government like Lagos State, you have houses for workers. We need to encourage this more. Workers' village, transit cities, and everything.
I'm sorry, no.
So
We
I
need to
believe,
round up with you now. I'm very
okay,
sorry.
thank you so much.
I'm doing this
So I
hatefully,
believe,
so that
yes,
we
I
can
believe with all
take a
this,
few
we
minutes
can
from
have,
everybody else. Thank
yes,
you
thank
very
you
much.
so much.
Thank you
Yes, sir.
very much. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So I'll ask Mr. Lukman to give us a very concise summary of his points, and then we'll go to the prof and round up. Thank you. You have to unmute. Mr. Lukman, you have to unmute. I think Mr. Lukman is frozen. So we'll go to Prof. Can we have your last word for a minute or so, and then we can round up. Thank you.
With affordable housing, I think the system can work. So we just need to work through the value chain and make it happen. So government need to play a role, private sector need to play a role, different community groups need to play a role, and of course different professional and trade associations, including cooperative societies. All of us has a role to play in making that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lukman. We missed half of it, but thank you, though.
Oh.
Prof, can we have last words from you? Thank you.
I think we need to go back to first principles and understand that Nigeria is not a rich country. Nigeria is a poor country, very poor, poverty-ravaged country. We need to understand that oil, that raw materials is not the basis of wealth, but the transformation of material. And the reason Nigeria is a poor country is that the oil that we depend on, there is really very little contribution of Nigeria in the value chain. So the wealth is actually taken elsewhere. So we remain poor. So this issue of contribution in the value chain, unless we understand it, we not only have to understand it, we have to digest it, we have to ingest it. And then when we have this understanding about industrialization, that for our population, the kind of things you have in Dubai or whatever cannot work here. For 200 million people, the economy has to be a production economy, not a market economy. We are not going to get there by trading. We're going to get there by production. So there has to be some massive education for even the educated on this. Once you have that education, when we understand that we need to create wealth, then the different industrial areas, different industries would now start looking at how do we create wealth within our industries? How is our industry going to be an engine of growth, an engine of production that creates wealth rather than one that sucks in, that consumes wealth? And in housing, it really boils down to what there must be aggregation for large scale production. There must be a movement away from customization to standardization. And there must be a movement for high value added performance materials rather than low value added high value added building components rather than low value added building materials. Building components are on a higher value scale than materials. That's really the issue. So large scale production of components, that's the direction that we need to go. That's in terms of the housing aspect. But the overall understanding, the overall change of mind, the overall change of paradigm is so fundamental for the whole economy for us to make progress. Thank you.
Thank you for a summary, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been nice spending an hour and 30 minutes with you. We've learned a lot from this, and I believe that if we push with the ideas that we have here today, at least a start can be made towards kind of giving ourselves a footing in the world regarding housing and our poverty problem, which we can use housing as a way to step over. So I thank all the panelists, and I thank Open House Lagos for organizing such a smooth and nice conference. Thank you guys for your time, and have a nice day to everybody. Cheers.